Hi everyone and welcome to the GFS gallery. Really excited about giving you an update on the Aquascaper 1200. I have released a video of this fairly recently describing all the plants in more detail, all of the equipment. But this particular episode I wanted to go into a couple of updates. First of all, I've added some new fish, Asian Rummynose, Sabois resplendens, I think the full name is, the scientific name. There's 10 male in there, 10 female. The females are fairly drab, but they're important because they allow the males to bring out their colour. And you can see why they're called Asian Rummynose. They look quite similar to the regular Rummynose tetras, but these are not tetras. These are from Asia, obviously, hence the name. And they're beautiful fish. They do actually prefer harder water, so this is perfect for my aquarium as my water is very hard out of the tap. Other updates, you can see the stem plants are starting to grow really nicely towards the surface, have a really beautiful colour, especially their limnophila hyperoides. I'm going to allow them to grow to the surface almost, and then I'll trim them right back, and then the new growth, where you trim from, will produce 2 new shoots, and then it will give a really bushy appearance and really kind of look a lot denser and a lot more lush. So I might repeat that process a couple of times over the next month or so, depending on how quickly it grows, and then it will be ready for its final kind of photo shoot. Might even enter it into a contest or two, but certainly obviously give you some beautiful video content hopefully. Other changes, nothing really. The plants are just maturing nicely. I did a big maintenance session, got back from honeymoon a week or so ago, and it was pretty much left to its own devices for 2 weeks. I dropped the photo period from 8 hours down to 4 hours. The fertiliser was on an auto doser from D&D, the P1, and Harrison, my stepson, he came in to the house every day to feed the fish. So when I came back, the biggest thing was that the water level was quite low from the evaporation. Apart from that, everything was fine, no algae issues. Interestingly, the limnophila almost went completely green, so it lost its red pigmentation, which I assume is due to the lower lighting. The overall photo period was reduced significantly. So that was interesting, and now I've upped it. Interesting experiment for me is that I'm actually running a long photo period with a siesta. So some of you may have heard of this principle. What I'm doing is running 5 hours on, 2 hours off, and then another 5 hours on. So effectively we're getting almost a 12-hour total viewing window, obviously apart from that 2-hour break in the middle. Now there are various some theories about this helps to limit algae growth, etc. But for me it's more about actually wanting faster growth, more growth, and actually I'm at home right now a lot more over the festive period. I want to enjoy the aquarium for as long as I can, and because I'm at home, if I do spot any issues because of the excess lighting, if there is indeed excess lighting, I can deal with that while I'm here. Another theory is that during this siesta, the CO2 levels are allowed to build up. So I will be running the CO2 for that whole period, including when the lights are off. So when the lights are off, that CO2 is going to build. And then when the lights come on again after the 2 hours, there's going to be potentially a higher level of CO2 for the plants to be able to utilise and potentially get more growth, and then that might lead to less algae risk. It's a bit of a controversial topic. A lot of people don't believe in the siesta at all, but for me it's more of a practical reason, so I can actually view the tank over this 12-hour window. I can enjoy it in the morning and I can enjoy it in the afternoon as well. So something that maybe you guys want to try at home. I'm a great believer, and you can read the textbooks, you can read articles on the internet, etc. But my kind of philosophy is, try it for yourself and see what works for you. And then that is whether you know the science behind it or not. If it does work for you, it works for you. I'm not a massive scientist. I'm a great believer in practicing for yourself and learning that way. I think this is the best way to learn personally. So it's looking really good. I'm really happy with it. There's hardly any algae issues. There's a little bit of blackbeard algae or blackbrush algae. I do get teased about that from the guys at Aquarium Gardens. But I'm happy to live with that. To actually kind of completely destroy the BBA, I'll probably have to use kind of chemicals or really kind of hard brush. Everything else is going really well. The carpet's getting really nice and dense and quite compact, which I'm really happy with. The crypts are growing in nicely, kind of slowly building and maturing and looking more bushy. And the colours, I think, are looking more intense as the crypts are kind of settling in really nicely over the last few months. it's really bringing out their colours nicely. So fish-wise, you know the fish from before probably if you've watched the playlists. Do consider binge watching the playlists. I have an entire series dedicated to this tank, all the way from emptying the previous scape to creating the new one, the hardscape. I did a video on the equipment separately, and then obviously I've done multiple videos on updates and how I maintain it, and more detailed videos about the equipment, etc. I've really enjoyed this tank. It's coming to the end of the year now, and it is going to be an interesting year next year. I will do another video before the new year to announce some exciting plans for 2020, so keep an eye out for that. One of the great things about this scape is that this tank has been running in its current form or another for the last 3 years, and it's given me so much pleasure. Hopefully giving you guys some pleasure and inspiration, education as well. And you know, I'm really fond of it, and I will, if and when I do let it go, if I sell it or give it away, I will miss it a lot. But like I said, got some exciting plans for 2020. I won't reveal them just yet. So another part of the video, I wanted to talk about maybe some slightly controversial topics, but basically kind of 5 things that I probably do that maybe a lot of you don't do. It's not to say that what I do is the best way and what you do at home is the wrong way. It's just a different way. And I think one of the biggest things we can learn in this hobby is that there are many paths to the top of the mountain. It doesn't mean there's one particular path that's better than the others, and the view from the top is the same, to quote a famous phrase. So what I'm saying is, you know, by all means watch my videos, learn from them, but if you do find yourself succeeding with other techniques, other methodologies, then that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to discredit you. I'm not going to say my way is better than yours, but it's just, you know, my way works for me and it could work for you. So number 1 is that I have never tested my aquarium water in this aquarium. In fact, since I've lived at this address for the last nearly 6 years now, yeah, nearly 6 years, I haven't tested my aquarium water at all. I don't remember testing it ever. That sounds very controversial, very dangerous, but I'll explain why I can kind of get away with that. Number 1 is that I tend to always use mature filtration. You're going to get down now, mate. Go on then. Good boy. I tend to use mature filtration, which allows me to stock fish right away without having to test for ammonia or nitrite. 95% of the time I will have a very heavily planted aquarium. So what this means is the plants will happily use ammonia, nitrite and nitrate as an ammonia source. So if I'm experiencing healthy plant growth, which I always am, then I can guarantee that the waste that the fish are producing is being more than dealt with by the plant growth. So the plants in themselves are a super efficient biological filter. And I don't overstock with fish, I always understock with fish. So for me, an aquarium, an aquascape is all about balancing the livestock. So having beautiful plants and a carefully kind of curated selection of fish to balance visually, aesthetically and biologically with those plants. Test kits are very good for beginners, especially if you want to fishless cycle a tank. That's another topic which we can go into more detail about. Basically, I don't fishlessly cycle with an ammonia source because my plants are doing the cycling for me. Like I said, I can plant very heavily from the outset, at least 40–50% of those plants being fast growers. They're going to deal with any ammonia that the fish are producing. One of the potential dangers is that if you're using some soils, they can leach ammonia. So it might be worth investing in an ammonia test kit just for that. If I'm personally setting up a new tank from scratch with brand new soil, I use brand new plants and then I'll wait 2 to 3 weeks doing lots of water changes, etc. Then I'll slowly introduce the livestock then. This means that I don't have to test my water. I don't test for pH or hardness. I know for a fact that my water's hard coming out of the tap because my kettle gets lime scale on it. We get hard water marks on the shower screen, and I get hard water marks when the water evaporates. It just leaves behind this kind of hard water deposit. I don't actually know what the hardness is of my water here. I just know it's very hard, and I choose the livestock and the plants accordingly. So I've never tested for pH, I don't think, since I've been here, nor hardness, nor ammonia, nitrate or nitrate. I haven't tested for phosphate either. I don't know if there's lots of phosphate in my tap water, but what I do is add phosphate and nitrate, in fact, via a liquid fertiliser. In my case, Tropico Specialised Nutrition. There are other brands available, and you can dose estimative index as well. So what is EI, or the estimative index? It basically relies on you deliberately overdosing nutrients. Typically you'll buy dry chemicals online, so potassium nitrate, potassium phosphate and a trace element mix are the three kind of most common types that you can buy. Some stores, online stores, or even maybe a physical bricks and mortar store might sell you individual kind of components as well. But it's a very cheap and effective way at getting the right amount of nutrients into your aquarium. It does require some kind of calculating and mixing, and for this reason a lot of people like to just use a all-in-one liquid fertiliser, which is what I do. Or you can even buy liquid fertilisers for each nutrient component. So you can buy an iron, a nitrogen, phosphorus, trace element mix. There's so many different products on the market. A couple of controversial issues there potentially. I don't test my water, and I use a form of EI. So I actually dose 20 millilitres of the Tropico Specialised Nutrition every day. Now that sounds like a lot, it is a lot, but if I don't do that, I start to see pale leaf growth. So what happens is the fastest growing plants will show deficiencies first, because they're growing faster, they're using the nutrients faster. If they go deficient, they start to go pale. So the fastest grower in here is the Hygrophila siamensis 53B. At the moment it is quite a light green colour, so I probably could even dose more than the 20 ml a day and we would be absolutely fine. This is a good kind of learning point. If you want to really kind of keep an eye on the nutrient levels in your aquarium without having to use test kits, you can use what we call indicator plants. So plants that grow the fastest. Floating plants are a great example, and fast growing stem plants, or weeds as we like to call them, aquatic weeds. The faster they're growing the plant, the more quickly it's going to show nutrient deficiency. So keep an eye on that plant. If you start to see it going pale, add more nutrients, and then you can almost guarantee that the slower growing plants are never going to go deficient in nutrients. So maybe a bit of a tip for you guys. What other kind of controversial topics can we talk about? So I do huge water changes. At least I kind of drain it down to about here, so about 80%. And the reason for that is, in my experience, the more water change, the better. So you're flushing out by taking all of that waste organic laden water out and putting fresh water in there. You're just diluting all these algae triggering waste organics. Part of that water change, I'll often deliberately kind of wave my hands around the plants. You know, I'll literally get my fingers inside the carpet and give it a good rub. It lifts all of this waste organic accumulation up into the water, and then I siphon that out as part of the water change. So by doing this 80% water change, you're really kind of flushing out all of these nasties, replacing them with nice fresh tap water, which is being dechlorinated. And the fish seem to love it, the plants certainly love it, and algae hates it. So this is the reason I do these huge water changes. A lot of people think, oh, the pH swing might be massive, but I've never noticed any issues. You know, crypts will melt if there's a huge pH swing potentially. Very rarely see any crypt melt. The livestock have never suffered. The shrimp are breeding in there. The Apistogramma's breeding in there. So, you know, all I can say is these huge water changes aren't having a negative impact as far as I can see on the aquarium system. Another thing that I do is add quite a lot of CO2. So I run about 3 or 4 bubbles per second on this system through an inline diffuser. I've turned it off right now so the water's like crystal clear. Because it's inline, you'll get a big cloud of micro bubbles kind of floating around the aquarium, which slightly kind of blurs the image. So I turn it off for filming. I think I would need to use more CO2 because the water is harder. In my experience, the softer your aquarium water, the less CO2 you need. The harder your aquarium water, the more CO2 you need to get that equivalent kind of growth rate. Another thing that I always stick to is easy plants. Now I get quite a lot of comments on this, a lot of feedback saying, you know, George, all your scapes look the same, you use the same plants. I'm grateful for the feedback because it gives me the opportunity to explain why. Now, I'm not here to show off competition standard scapes. This channel is about promoting aquascaping, hopefully making it more accessible, inspirational and educational for you guys. So I like to use easy plants because it means they're more commonly available, they're easier to grow in a wider range of conditions, which means more of you guys can replicate what I'm doing. So that's why I stick to easy plants. I have hard tap water, so it would be difficult for me to grow super demanding plants. I don't want to run super high levels of lighting because I don't have the time to maintain an aquarium with really high lighting and the consequent fast plant growth, the required water changes, nutrient control, etc. I just don't have the time. I do so much travelling. So that's why I stick to a general kind of palette of plants, ferns, anubias, bucophilandra, cryptocorynes, easy carpeting plants, easy stem plants. And that is my wheelhouse of plants that I use. Whenever I scape for a private client, they've often seen my videos and they want to replicate what they see in the videos. They don't even want me to create them a super high-end scape because they know they need to maintain it themselves. And often these private clients are also beginners. Something else that I often do is skip water changes. Now, I wouldn't recommend this to anyone because it'll often lead to algae growth. But sometimes I'll go a whole month now without water changing this. In fact, when I went on honeymoon, before leading up to the wedding, the honeymoon, etc., this probably went a whole month without any maintenance. But as you can see, it looks fine. It's mature, it's a mature system, the filtration's mature, the substrate's mature, the plants are grown in and settled in. There's not massive amount of livestock producing waste. So you can get away with a less frequent water change, but I wouldn't recommend it. If you do stick to the weekly water changes, at least 50%. This is what I recommend for most planted aquarium systems. Okay guys, I think that's enough of me rambling. I really enjoyed that. I've not done that for ages. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And you take care. Keep on scaping. Cheerio. So what I do is focus on the front of the aquarium, zooming in digitally on the camera, and I use manual focus to make sure that's pin sharp, and then I line up my face with the front of the glass, and then hopefully that means that we're all going to be equally in focus. Top tip. It is looking so good right now.